Welcome, Calynn, to the Vulnerable Voices podcast. I am super excited to have you join my podcast around mental health, talking about all things uncomfortable to get comfortable. And I'm really happy that you decided to reach out and want to share your journey with me. There's a lot in there that we connect on, and the work that you're doing, I think, is inspiring and incredible. Without further ado, I would love for you to introduce yourself and then we can get right into it.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Nisha. I am so excited to be on the show. My name is Calynn, and I am the founder of the Holistic Healing Source for Marginalized Society, which is a virtual, free, globally accredited resource center where you can find all types of holistic health, especially holistic mental health, training materials, advocacy content, so on and so forth. And I also am on the National Alliance of Mental Illnesses Illinois State Board of Directors, which I'm very happy about. So I am very excited to be here today.
Thank you so much. You're doing incredible work and I love it. It's all very exciting and very empowering, I have to admit. I'm looking forward to later on kind of digging deep of where that came from and your story. Talk me through a bit about you. Let's get to know you a bit more. What was it like growing up as Kaylin? What was your family like and sort of how did things unfold in terms of your mental and emotional health?
Well, I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago in a community called Marquette Park. Low income community, predominantly Hispanic, but also a lot of African Americans as well. And I have two sisters, and my two parents have been married pretty much my whole life, Don and Tori. And I began to struggle with my mental health in eighth grade. It peaked. It's my mental illness peaked when I was about 13 after I had unfortunately been assaulted by a group of young men and held that in and did not tell anybody for a very, very long time. And the symptoms of my depression began to manifest. Unfortunately, that led to a planned suicide attempt for my 14th birthday. And that is what started my realization of mental health being a real thing.
I'm really sorry that you experienced that. I don't think any human being should be exposed to that kind of behavior. We're all humans at the end of the day. And it makes me sad. I think this is what really struck me in terms of your journey as a strength that you've always, seemed to have and what you put out there, despite what you've been through, you're still a kind human being. When you were going through that and you were assaulted and, you mentioned that you didn't share it, what made you feel like you couldn't share? What stopped you? And then around you, did you have the right support or were you quite isolated in that experience?
Some of what made me hesitant was real, and some of it was probably just general anxiety that may not have been fully formed, I guess, because I was so young. But one of my main concerns was that because I had fairly strict parents and I grew up in a religious family on both sides, they're different denominations of Christianity, but both sides were religious. I felt like if I come out and say, because I was already under the microscope so heavily and, critiqued very heavily about everything I did, how I like the smallest details on my outfits and all of this pressure to constantly overperform and be a certain way. I felt like if I come out and say, oh, this happened to me, that the little bit of freedom that I did have would then be taken away because my parents would then, especially my dad in this case, would then shift some of that blame on me and say, okay, well, you must have done something to contribute to this happening. So as a result, you have even less freedom than you already have. So that was one of my main concerns. And then also just general shame and knowing how victims of sexual assault get treated, especially within organized religion. I didn't want to deal with the shame either. So that's why I didn't say anything until I was a young adult.
In terms of that shame and lack of freedom, what would you have liked for your parents or family to have done for you in that moment to create safety as advice to parents to any children that may have been like going through the same thing or experienced something similar now? What would you really like to advise parents or people to create that safety?
Think that something that would have been helpful is to go beyond saying with your words, "Oh, tell us if something happened to you. What happened to you? Like, we want to know. Like, if somebody bothers you, come to us." Like, instead of just saying that, especially in such an aggressive tone where it comes off like you're going to be in trouble if something happens to you, um, eh, actually creating an environment where your child is able to come to you with their thoughts and their um troubles without the perceived threat of, oh, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to be punished for it. Because if you're an overly strict parent, which I do feel like my
Mhm.
parents in a lot of ways were, if you're an overly strict parent and then you're saying with your mouth like, yeah, you can come and talk to me, but you're not giving your kids a certain amount of freedom to feel comfortable, then they're not going to come to you, even though you're saying that out of your mouth. So I think that parents need to actively create a culture of open mindedness and some level of autonomy with their kids so that the kids can actually feel comfortable relaying that information.
100%. I think you're right there. I think the words and actions don't really align, and it's similar culturally in my culture as well, an Indian background, and I'm sure many others, where the action and the words don't always match up, so the consistency of the support isn't necessarily always there when you need it, or it's you say one thing and you're doing the complete opposite, so the child is left confused, and then the only thing they can do is not say anything and just let it, ride out, or you kind of end up trying to look for support in other ways, right? And I know in your journey, it was, multiple things that you experienced, the isolation, lack of support, being shamed. That carries a lot of weight for human beings, especially young children as you're growing up, because you start to develop your psychological understanding and safety and your development. You're still developing the emotional maturity. I know you mentioned that you sadly had two suicide attempts. Talk me through what got you to that point and what actually stopped you from taking your own life. What kept you alive?
Well, in my first case, which was when I was in 8th grade, my 14th birthday, my mom had actually intervened and she interrupted the process and immediately was like, we've got to get her to the hospital because she had had her own struggles with mental health and was studying psychology in school. So she was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like a big deal. And plus, my parents had recently taken my phone away because, ooh, I was talking to boys, not sleeping with them, not risking anything serious, but I was just talking to boys. So I had gotten my phone taken. Um, and I actually had been discussing with a couple of my friends that I was planning this suicide. But I think we were so young, I don't know if they didn't take me seriously or if they just didn't want to say anything because they didn't feel it was their business, but, like, I had been talking to them in my text messages, for a couple of weeks before this point, and she saw those messages, and then she went through my diary and saw that I was writing about it in my diary and, like, all of this stuff, and she intervened. So, thank God for that, and I was hospitalized and put on a bunch of meds and all of that. Then fast forward, a decade later when I was in my early 20 or mid-20s, fast forward to that point, I had been driven out of a high control religion that I was a part of for over a decade. For 4 years, I was an active, like, full-time, person in the ministry while being a full-time college student and while working and all of this other stuff. and I was driven out due to a bunch of rumors and drama that was circulating about me. A lot of it either was not true or just heavily exaggerated, and I lost a lot of relationships that I had spent my whole life building with these people. So once I experienced being exiled from that, um, that was the tipping point of a nervous breakdown and a lot of just very bad choices that were coming from a place of distress and despair, including, experiencing alcoholism in my early 20s and even going into my mid 20s and all of that. So once it reached a certain point, I was just ready for all of this to be over with. I had dealt with so much loss and so much grief and just so much pain from having major depressive disorder, which is a chronic, incurable psychological condition. From all of that, I was just ready to be done. I just could not take it anymore. Um, and unfortunately, I did attempt. And what saved me was that I actually experienced what I recognize now to have probably been a hallucination from, all of the medicine that I had overdosed on in an attempt to take my life. And I thought that God was coming to me, talking to me, because I was on my bathroom floor in my bathroom, crying profusely, chugging the pills, all of that. Had my letter typed up and it was scheduled to be emailed to my family and friends the next morning. I had already drawn up my will, all of that. And when I had this, what I recognize now to have probably been hallucination, where God was telling me, "Get off the floor, my child. You have too much to do on this earth, too much good to do, too many lives to change, too much, impact to make, too many hearts to heal. Like, get off this floor and do what you are purposed to do. Do what you are destined to do. This is not the end of your story." So I got up and I puked my guts up into my tub. I puked everything I could until I literally had massive stomach pains. I puked it all up because I had chugged over half a bottle of pills at that point. And I said, okay, I've got to make some changes. So I made some drastic life changes in terms of who was around me, who was in my close circle. I got heavily back in therapy. I got back on meds. And then I also started doing group therapy. And because of those things, I haven't had an attempt since.
Honestly, you've come so far, and I'm super proud that you're able to share this side of the story. I think, whoever was speaking to you, whether it's God or just another extension of your subconscious or, something bigger than us was protecting you in that moment because they knew that you had a purpose to fill. And I think you're doing an incredible job of doing that. And you should be really proud of yourself. I know exactly what it feels like to be in that state in terms of, not wanting to be here. And, there are so many things that people don't realize you go through to get to that point, but then also after the healing also it continues afterwards. And in that, it makes me sad because there are parts where I think a lot of education around respect towards humans, how men treat women, societally, how we can respect one another. What advice would you really want to give to like young boys and men out there as well, given, what you'd been through at such a young age?
Definitely, I would say while they're young boys, I'm going to put this on their parents. Make sure you instill in all your children, whether they're male, female, non-binary, whoever they are, but especially when it comes to young boys, instill in them a sense of empathy and compassion and care for people outside of themselves so that when it comes time for them to be able to control certain urges or not involve themselves in harmful behavior, especially behavior that is harmful to other people, they can have that foundation to kind of keep them at bay from like carrying out those urges or those impulses or those pressures. So really try to instill that in them because it will go a long way with them. Then in terms of adult men, say in this day and age with the internet being open access for everybody, there's the library that's free, you know try to educate yourself on one, things like self-control, your own mental health, your own, overall well-being, but also just staying informed of the struggles that people outside of you go through so that you can have that background knowledge that will just make you overall a better person. Because even with myself, there's certain privileges that I have that other people don't have. And like just being aware of those things and not walking around with this attitude of like entitlement and I can do what I want because who's going to check me, not having that is very helpful in making people be good people.
No, that's brilliant advice. And it's so true. There are so many free resources out there, which again, on your platform, you provide too. So that's one that I'll mention later for people to engage with, have a look at as well, because I could think it's really important. Why do you think people are so opposed to taking accountability for themselves? Why? I feel like we sometimes can be in this blame culture. It must be someone else's fault. It must be them. It must be what stops people from pausing and going, Wait, what about me? What is my contribution to this? What's your opinion on that?"
Think And granted, this occurred long before the internet, of course, but I think that social media has really created a bunch of think tanks and a bunch of echo chamber cesspools of really problematic ideologies. And if you allow yourself, like, so if you're a man, like the red pill content, if you're a woman, sometimes either like the pink pill content or like the content that is in the opposite direction where it is feminist and it is liberal, but it's so extremely like to the other end of the spectrum that it's almost allowing no room for any type of compassion or grace for people who aren't exactly in that same spot as politically or in terms of their like societal views or values or whatever. So I feel like with social media, like there's sometimes so many different extremes in terms of different like thinking patterns and ideologies that people can get wrapped up in those content circles and the algorithm is just feeding them all this content all the time and it's like this nonstop cycle. So I think that just being very intentional about what you consume, not just on social media, but like podcasts, YouTube, social media clips, what you're watching on TV, the radio, whatever it is, like being intentional to not fall into those rabbit holes, I think will make you a lot more accountable. Because if you're only listening to people who look like you and agree with you, of course you don't want to take accountability.
Yeah, 100%. And I also agree with you in that sense of, it's the algorithms are really powerful and it's addictive. Social media is just as addictive as, drugs and sex, alcohol, all these substances that we use. It's just another form, isn't it? But you do have control over what you're choosing to absorb. I just feel like I feel like the day and age that we are in, we have too much, and actually we need to simplify it sometimes. And we're sort of in this contradiction of there are people fighting for the simplicity, and there are people still fighting and making sure that you're hooked in these systems that keep you addicted. And I just wish people who are on the other side use their talents for some good and to help more people. I know you're doing a lot of help in your work and things like that. What are you up to? I know trauma-informed spiritual care is one of them. Do you want to sort of explain what that is to people who might not know and what's involved?
Yes. So I am very much a huge proponent of whole person care or holistic care. And what that involves is mind, body, spirit. So mind meaning mental health and also being educated on different types of concepts and useful subject matters. So that's the mind. Body meaning like your physical body. Like, are you doing whatever exercise is beneficial to you? Are you, drinking your teas? Are you drinking your water? Are you eating nutritious foods or whatever? Then the spirit part being like the the intangible part of you, like the soul, the metaphysical. So, like being able to have some kind of connection to a higher power or the universe or, whatever it is you believe, whether, that's Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, whatever it is, having some kind of faith in something outside of just humans. Like, I really do feel like for most people, that's critical in them being able, especially when things get really hard in their life, being able to maintain hope in a better future beyond just Earth. So, um, for me, I try to advocate for this and provide resources for this that are free and accessible via video content, presentations, papers, courses I've created. And all of those things are on holistichealingsource.org. And then in terms of my volunteer work, I am on the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Illinois State Board of Directors, and I volunteer with a lot of other nonprofits. And I just really make this an effort to make sure people know that they have access to these things.
I just hats off to you how hard you work to create these things. As a creator myself and trying to raise awareness for mental health, physical health, spiritual health, emotional health, and be a mentor for people, it takes a lot of time and energy, and you have to be really passionate about this to create these materials, put them online, keep going, keep going. What are some of the challenges that you're facing with people who are a bit opposed to it, unsure, don't really know much, and kind of challenge you and go, well, does it work? Does it not? Like, how is it going to benefit me actually? What challenges do you face and what do you say to them?
Well, for me, there's mainly two groups of people, and I think you'll probably relate to this, who tend to be more skeptical about engaging in, especially like mental health education and mental health treatment and resources. And those are people of color and men. And that is because of the stigma that is placed on people of color receiving mental health treatment and resources, and men. Men because they're viewed as weak if they seek that help, which is not at all true, which is why the suicide rates among men are so high, because they're not getting the support that they need to avoid getting to that point. Um and then also in terms of people of color, we have just been, as racial minorities, we have just been systemically oppressed to the point where we don't have a lot of faith or trust in like the healthcare system because it hasn't always been kind to us. So we are just so standoffish in that way. And then also like if you come from a low income family background, like they may not have had the resources to do it. So now it's like, oh, well, we were fine all this other time. We don't need that now. So, the way I respond to those people is I really try and thoroughly promote breaking the stigma through the social media posts that we create, through the educational workshops we host, through my personal interactions with people. And whenever I do press interviews, I try and talk about it. So I really try and actively combat those thinking patterns because I know how deeply entrenched they are within men and within people of color. And it's been making some progress. Still a long way to
Yeah.
go.
I know, and I think, well, starting is better than doing nothing, right? And you've come this far, and I'll be a huge advocate for this because I think it's really important. And you touched on something there where actually my first conversation on my first episode, I spoke to someone who was a male who went through divorce and, actually talked about the stigma about seeking professional help, the stigma around men amongst men talking together about real stuff instead of it being masked with a drink or surface level conversation. Actually, I sometimes feel going back to the basics in schools and upbringing, you teach them core communication skills. You teach them that it's okay to express themselves, that they're not going to be judged. And I do think societally as well, I think there are some women out there as well, and some might hate me for saying this, but hoorah, is we also contribute without realizing. We make those off the cuff comments sometimes at them. We judge them. We don't give them a chance. And then we sometimes want to complain about it. And it's like, hold on a minute. Yes, they have a lot of work to do, but we can also support them too. Have you had some women who have challenged you and, what's their feedback with some of the work that you do? And have you been able to almost not convince them, but change their mind towards spiritual and holistic care?
Yes. So the main pushback I get from women, and as a woman myself, I understand where this comes from, but I'm like, we've got to break out of that. They really don't like when I talk about things like police brutality and the black and brown school to prison pipeline, especially in the US. When I get to breaking down how that happens, a lot of them really don't like that because the reality is police brutality and the black and brown school to prison pipeline, at least in the US, that is one of very few areas where men are less privileged than women
Mm,
systemically in terms of oppression in the US at least. Um, because that whole system does target men a lot more than it does target women. Like statistically, that is just the truth.
mm,
And there have been too many studies that have proven this time and time and time again. Now, granted, women are still targeted, and they're targeted in a different way, usually a lot more sexually exploited and, taken away from their kids. And like that is a whole thing with them too, but it does institutionally affect men, especially men of color, a lot worse than
mm,
it does women as a whole. So whenever I talk about those things, because that is something I'm very, very passionate about, that legal system reform aspect, I'm always talking about legal system reform as a whole for everybody, woman, man, non-binary. But when I talk about, the special emphasis on men of color, a lot of women don't like that because they feel like, why are you saying, like, you're essentially saying like, oh, it's worse for them, it's not harder to be a man than it is to be a woman, especially not a woman of color, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm not saying that it is
mhm,
holistically or generally speaking harder to be a man than it is to be a woman. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying in this aspect, this is what the data shows. So usually if
mm.
I can cite the studies, I can show them visuals, I can point out, hey, this is stemming all the way back 40, 50 years if we're looking at, reports on how men are targeted versus women, they'll usually, yield. Even if internally they still feel some type of way about it, they'll usually yield. So my general tactic is just showing the facts.
Yeah, that definitely helps solidify because if it's not factual, and sometimes this is some of the pushback with spiritual care and holistic care, is not it's not always evidence based in terms of like tangible evidence, especially with spiritual care. When you're like, "Do you know, I did this and it felt great, and I saw the results," and you're like, okay, where's the evidence? And you're like, you can't always evidence these things, but it comes back to your point about having empathy towards humans as a whole. And with that empathy is so powerful for people who start off with that mindset and really want to challenge you and push you to them being like, huh, actually, you've got a point. I understand. I'm going to back off a little bit. And that skill in itself to navigate different humans with different opinions and thought is so skillful and it's such a talent to do because you have a point in what you're trying to say. They just need to understand it in a way that their minds are going to understand it. Tell me more about the social justice that you're doing, as much detail as you can. What projects and pushback have you had? What do you enjoy? And, where do you want to go with it?
Well, I have long had a level of empathy for people, especially who get caught up in the legal system because of the neighborhood I grew up in, high crime, low income area, inner city. I have a lot of relatives who've been to jail, been to prison, a lot of people I've dated, a lot of my friends, even, some of my coworkers, so growing up in an environment where so many people got caught up in that legal system and seeing like how unfair a lot of things were, that sparked my passion from a young age. But really, once I got in college and started studying criminology and criminal justice, like like in a scholastic sense and an
Mm.
academic sense. I was like, "Oh, wow, this is a lot deeper than I would have ever thought it was." So that sparked the pursuit of it. And, as I continued to go throughout school and earn all these degrees, like I always kept going back to that thread of like criminal justice, then also working in nonprofit. I've worked in nonprofit healthcare and education for a lot of my career. That has really exposed me to different populations and like how these systems affect them. So for me, that's where the passion really lies. And I I think I'm most passionate about two things. Digital advocacy. I love digital advocacy and activism because like it allows your message to reach everybody. Like it's infinite possibilities. So I love creating that kind of content. And then two, I love opportunities to educate people in the flesh. So going to different events and being able to speak and educate the communities and society about different concepts. I'm very passionate about that. And now um thanks to me being on the NAMI Illinois board of directors, I was connected with an advocacy group called Protect Our Care, and I'm going to be able to go with them to the Capitol to advocate in person to some of our legislators for certain changes to be made. So I'm very excited about all of this.
I love that. Is there anything you're a bit nervous about, or is it nervous excitement to try and make as much change as you can? Do you think you're prepared for some of the pushback that you might get?
Yes. So I think that, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, I think that because my proposed solutions are always holistic in nature. My training is holistic in nature, and they always include that spiritual component, which is not so easily able to be proved in a definitive scientific manner a lot of the time. I am prepared for people to continue to push back about that and, say, "Oh, well, because we can't definitively prove that, we need to put all of our resources into just the mental health piece or into just, the education piece." And I'm like, "No, we definitely need a lot of focus there, but we still need to include that spiritual piece too, access to equitable, relevant spiritual care of multicultural, religious and spiritual practices, not just Christianity in the US. Like it has to be fair and equitable and open-minded." So like I'm experiencing a little bit of pushback there because I think it's so important, the mind, body, spirit. I feel like you got to have all three. So I'm knowing that people will continue to push back about
Of
that.
course, it's yeah, it's so natural, and I think given your experience, given everything you've gone through, sometimes when you are at rock bottom and you're in your darkest place and you're almost not here, you have this really deep strength that regardless of what's going to come to you, you know you can face it because you've already been through, the worst. And so I just fingers crossed that it goes all well for you. I'm sure it will. I will 100% message you to try and find out how it's all going. Please do keep us updated. But what advice, given everything you've been through, your relationship with your family, the isolation, mental health struggles, what advice would you give to your younger self looking at you now? What would you say to her?
I would say, thank you for your support, also to you. And I'd say to my younger self, keep going. It will get better because the older I get, I feel like the better I am with handling hardships. I think just due to natural maturation, but also due to life experience, and also just having a better holistic system for my mental health treatment. But telling my younger self, in my mid-20s on down, like, "It will get better, just hang on, hold on." I think that would really help me because so many times when I was younger, like, I would have never thought I'd make it to 30, many a days I didn't think I'd make it to 30 years old. But, like, to know that I've come so far and I have a long way to go and I think I can accomplish a lot of great things, I wish I would have felt that way when I was younger because so many days I didn't.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's hard. I think, do you know, one thing that people don't notice, especially when it comes to any form of mental health challenges, is that you can easily showcase that you're okay. You can put on that mask, you can go day to day, high functioning depression, high functioning anxiety, but actually underneath, and this is why these kind of conversations, for me personally, it's why I started the podcast and it's why I do what I do, and workshops and events to kind of promote mental health and how we can holistically look after ourselves, is because you can't see it. It's not a physical symptom or thing that you can see, like a wound on your arm or a scratch or something physical. It's internal, and unless someone's willing to sort of sit with you, create safety, ask you and be curious about you, even advice like if someone were to say, if you have a close friend and you aren't able to tell the signs, or there aren't obvious symptoms of someone who wants to take their life, just keep asking daily, how are you? Are you okay? Are you really? I'm here for you. And there might be that one time that they actually open up that could save them from not being here. Um, I just think it's really important. And I think mental health and you and how we've connected, that is just something I think we're both passionate about, and I love it. What, in terms of your relationship with your family, how is that now, given, from the journaling and the things that your mum found and the journey from there, how has things been? Have they changed in a positive way?
They have, definitely. I'd say especially like in the last 5+ years, like me and my parents, especially my dad, have come quite a long way in our relationships. And we've, gotten to a point where I talk to them, even though I've been moved out. This year will be 5 years I've been moved out of my parents' house, and I still talk to them, you know, if not every day, every other day. I see them every week. We do stuff. And, me and my sisters have gotten very, very close. Me and my little sister were always pretty close, but like me and my big sister have gotten a lot closer. Her and my little sister have gotten a lot closer. We as a family have, just come a long way and have grown in our bond. And I really appreciate that. And, they support me, same as like, other relatives and like my close friends and all of that. So I support them as well. So I am happy, and I have to credit some of that to going to therapy, like my couple of my immediate family members, well, a few of them really, all except for like one of them, have their own struggles with mental and behavioral health. And most of them have gotten treatment for that and gone to therapy and just learned a lot about themselves and done a lot of healing. And I think that it's definitely shown up in how we're able to just have so much fun and be at peace with each other.
I love that you've inspired other members to go therapy. It just takes one person to go and say, "Do you know what? It's not scary. It's actually just a place where you can feel safe and cry and share and not be judged." All the feelings that you felt growing up, where you said judgment, shame, guilt, and being invalidated. So hats off to you. And I hope after this conversation, more people go away and want to explore that and be curious about therapy. Where can people start if they really want to make small, small steps towards feeling better, doing the right things? What would you recommend? And also, do you think the people you surround yourself with have a big impact on how you are as a whole person?
Yes, definitely. So definitely, if you're constantly around people who are negative Nancy's and don't want you to better yourself and get help and do what you need to do to heal, don't talk to those people regularly if you don't have to. Like if you don't live with them or, whatever, don't talk to those people regularly if you don't have to, because that's only gonna prolong your recovery process. So definitely try to avoid those people. Surround yourself with a positive support network. And in terms of like steps for people who are new in their mental health journey, I would say you can always check out our library on holistichealingsource.org. It's completely free. We have several books that talk about their self help books. So you can print them, mix and match, customize, do whatever you want to do. It's completely free. No payment info, no contact info. None of that is needed. Just go and download it, holistichealingsource.org, where we talk about mental health, prayer journaling, dream journaling, manifestation, self control, trauma processing workbooks. Like we even have a neurodivergent academic planner. There's so many resources, that plus a bunch of trainings and advocacy content on that website for free. So definitely go there. Also, if you're in the US, NAMI.org, NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have completely free one-on-one peer counseling and group support groups that are tailored by different demographics, all across the US. And it's completely free. You can do it in person or over the phone or virtual. So check out them as well.
I love that. There's so many amazing resources. I've had a look at some and I think they're incredible. They're so easy to read and so easy to access. And I think making things for mental health more accessible and investing time and money from, higher sources, I think should be a key priority. I think it will make the world a better place, but your place here and you're doing an amazing job. So I will be sharing all your resources and everything in the description box on YouTube, on my social media. I think the more people that see it and can connect, honestly, you'll be making a world of difference to people. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you. Um, what would you like to achieve in the next sort of couple of years? Or do you think also sometimes taking a break a little bit for your own well-being is really important as well?
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I do agree. I do agree for sure. Taking a break is needed. My main accomplishments I'd like within the next couple of years. I want to be board certified as a forensic traumatologist. I'm in the process of finishing my second Master of Science degree focused in criminal justice so that I can get that, because I think it'll really amplify the advocacy and activism work I'm able to do. Two, I'd love to have our online library of self help books reach, probably not within the next 2 years, but like within the next 5 years. I'd love for that to reach 1 million visitors. So far, we've got over 100,000. So I'd love within 5 years for it to reach 1 million visitors. That'd be great. And then lastly, this one's like a little bit of a personal thing, not really professional, but I'd love within the next couple of years if I could find my life partner and get married so that I could start my family.
They'll be a very lucky person, I tell you that now. Honestly, a woman with such strength like yours, determination, grit to be, where you are now. I just whoever they are, they're gonna be one very lucky person. So I pray that for you. I'll manifest it for you out there. It will happen and just keep doing what you're doing. I think it's amazing.